This is going to be
Yes. All right, we are live. We are collaborating here with Consciously. Education is Elevation, which is what we are all about here at Feel Good Action, educating Americans about the most pressing political issues of the day and giving you the tools to actually fight back, take action, be involved in your community. Thank you, everyone coming in right now. For those not familiar with me, my name is Alex Cassio. I am partnered with Feel Good Action. We are a nonprofit geared towards getting out the vote, educating American people about politics, civil rights, voting rights, all of the most pressing issues of the day. And of course, we are here with George Conscious Lee. Introduce yourself, please.
Yes. I am George Lee, mostly known as Conscious Lee. My platform is Education is Elevation. This conversation will be followed by 5 key facts you can kind of, take away from this, as well as everything we reference. There would be a sources cited page, in an article that comes out on Education is Elevation. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in right now, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other platforms. Shout out to y'all.
Yes, thank you everyone for jumping in. So to kick it off, we are celebrating this week Juneteenth. Now, this is a holiday that I feel like especially, I don't know if you've noticed from my complexion, but white Americans just aren't aware of. In fact, I grew up in a majority Black community in Flint, Michigan, and I did not learn about Juneteenth until probably my college years. So, George, if you would like to go into a bit of the background of this holiday and what it is we're celebrating this week.
Yeah, this week we're celebrating when the General Granger pulled up to Galveston, Texas in June 19th, 1865. This is time after the Civil War ended, coming to bring the good, quote unquote, Jubilee good news to the enslaved Africans that was in Galveston. This news ended up kind of disseminating through different parts of the South. I'm actually doing a series right now about how they tried to hide Juneteenth from us. I'm born and raised in Bryan, Texas. It's about 2 hours, from Galveston, where, this started at. And when you read the archive in the newspaper, you see that a lot of the slave masters, a lot of the enslaved human traffickers, they purposely tried to hide the information about the Civil War, purposely tried to hide the information about the Emancipation Proclamation. But when it comes to the celebration of Juneteenth, it goes back to that day where a lot of enslaved people celebrated being free-ish. You know what I'm saying? And I say free-ish because when we go to the actual history books, we see that General Granger told the enslaved Africans to return back to their plantation and to negotiate some wages, literally ushering us in from the plantation directly into sharecropping, Jim Crow. So that's something I always like to put that in. And for the people that's not familiar with me, I have a undergraduate degree in African and African American studies, and I have a master's degree in adult and higher education and human relations. So want to make sure I substantiate things I'm talking about in terms of the time, effort, and energy that I put in studying these things, and the time, effort, and energy I put in being able to teach these things. Education is elevation. It's not just the motto, you know what I'm saying, but it's the way that we do it, how we do it around here. I hope that if you got any follow-up questions, I know there's like a quick and dirty, version. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love a quick, snappy background on that. And I think Juneteenth today, it's now in the year 2026, we're in such an interesting moment where we're seeing these attacks under the guise of attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion. But so much of it is really an attack on our history, right? We see the Trump administration ordering the removal of references to slavery at historical monuments, national parks, even museums. We see this history be swept under the rug and trying to shy away from our past. When it comes to Juneteenth in this present moment, given all of the attempts to sweep history under the rug, why do you think it's so important that we have this visibility on this right now?
Right now, preserving all the various ways that Black people, us as Black folks, have been able to politically, socially, economically, first, I'm going to say, fight for our own freedom and independence. I think a lot of times when we start talking about Black survivability or Black autonomy, we usually think about it being spurred on by, the white soldiers of the Union. And we don't think about the various ways that resistance has always already been happening for enslaved Africans on the plantation, as well as how the turning point, that's a turning point. Shout out to Kirky. But in terms of the turning point within the Civil War, we know that once enslaved people started to join the Union Army, that is when the Union started to be able to take resolve over whole General Robert E. Lee. I want to say that because it's important that we're able to really preserve the history of Black America, but also preserve the real, transparent, true history of America. I don't want to say like a romanticized, like Black history is American history, because we see obviously there's always been a tension, an antagonistic relationship between how Black people exist in America and how America wants to capitulate historically how Black people have existed in America. So I want to acknowledge that tension. But when it comes to this preserving history, it's like the same exact people, when there were policies being passed about, taking down statues, they were talking about preserving history and how you cannot change history. A lot of those very people are now engaging in what I would call conservative contradictions, specifically around policy, because now they're celebrating policy that literally is beefing with history. The very people that told me throughout social media, hey, Conscious, hey, George, hey, Conscious, stop thinking about the history. Stop thinking about the past. You've been stuck in the past. You're being a victim of the past. You're victimizing yourself. Let it go. It's the same various people that are very saying right now that the way that we talk about true history victimizes them, and we have to go back into the past to sanitize and romanticize it. The last thing I'll say to end this long-winded response, I recognize it's very long-winded, is all the ways we've been indoctrinated, or in some instances being taught about democracy. I would argue that we cannot ignore that all the various things that this current administration is doing through the policymaking process has been through the mastery of democratic tools. Regardless of how much we want to talk about them being undemocratic, the very system that individuals say does not allow for X, Y, and Z, this person, even before they were president, started to climb the ladder based off of policies. Or the swamp they talked about, they were able to profitize off of that. They were able to monetize it. They were able to climb the ladder and gain political power. That should not be ignored when we start talking about the erasure of Black history, the celebration of Juneteenth, and how there was democracy that slowed down Black folks being able to understand that the Emancipation Proclamation happened. And then 4 states that didn't happen, that the Emancipation Proclamation didn't impact: Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, and Missouri. So when we talk about Juneteenth and talk about the Emancipation Proclamation, also account for those states that have unique history that it didn't apply to.
That is so critical, because like when we are going through just K through 12 education, we're taught the Emancipation Proclamation happened and boom, slavery's over, slavery's done. But it took, first of all, the Emancipation Proclamation only applied to states in the Confederacy, which were in open rebellion. They're not taking orders from Abraham Lincoln. Those people are still enslaved. And states that were slave-holding states that were part of the Union who didn't secede, they were allowed to keep their slaves. So it was, yes, is it a foundational moment in history? Absolutely. But it was essentially toothless. And I think history is so, it is whitewashed, but that's not the word I'm looking for here. They want to have it just like the good guy always wins. You know what I mean? Like the Union came and we freed the slaves and everything was good. Yay! And then, it was a little bit rough still. We had segregation and things, but then Martin Luther King came and we got voting rights and we desegregated everything. Yay! It's not that simple, and it was a constant fight. And I think especially after the post-war era is where we see that, especially because, Reconstruction, we had so many Black people getting elected to office. We had our first Black senator out of Mississippi. That's deep South state, and we got our first Black senator. And then a decade later, Black people in Mississippi, if you even look at a voting booth, you are getting lynched, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think people don't really look at these ebbs and flows.
That's why, and I appreciate this conversation because I know that there is a rich history behind celebrating Juneteenth and Black history.
Yeah.
Growing up in Bryan, Texas, one of the biggest days in the Black community was the Juneteenth parade. As a matter of fact, in my community, starting after spring break, you seen all the dance teams, you seen everybody getting their cars together, you seen a lot of different people within the culture starting to sit with how I'm saying the culture, people in my community really getting ready to do the Juneteenth parade. So I'm not negating that, but I do think it's important that we highlight the complex, ugly history around freedom and how Black people have always already had a very, very complicated relationship to how freedom is seen in this country.
I think it's important too to recognize, like, obviously we've made a lot of progress in the United States. We've come a long way from the Civil War. At the same time, it's not just this linear upshoot of we are always making progressive steps. You have those downslides, right? We went from Reconstruction electing Black people in the South to Jim Crow. And in many ways, we're seeing that again right now. 1965, 100 years after those Union troops came to Galveston, Texas, we passed the Voting Rights Act in the United States. And then just this year in 2026, the Supreme Court just took an axe to that bill, and we have Southern states racing to eliminate majority Black voting districts across the South. Definitely. There's always those backslides. And I think people, when we get too complacent, thinking like, oh, no, we're always like in this progressive upswing, people aren't ready for the fact that there are those out there waiting to chip away at all of our hard-won rights.
Yeah, and I think that we can even add some to the analysis. It's like every time we have progression in this country, it's never happening in a vacuum, and there's always a resistance and tension that happens to that progression. I think that it's important to really sprinkle the complexity of history around Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil War, because there's a lot of things that didn't happen, that did happen, that complicates the way that this current administration wants us to think around policy when it comes to this romanticized, sanitized history of this country. I also feel like it's important that I highlight when this holiday became when Juneteenth became a federal holiday. I was a 9th and 10th grade English teacher in Oklahoma. They passed a bill that was trying to criminalize critical race theory, which was not being taught in K through 12 and really nowhere in the country. But because they able to create policy around this mythical boogeyman, it criminalized even us teaching our students how the history of Emancipation Proclamation and how the history of Juneteenth even happened, because it was seen as being critical race theory. Because how do you teach your children that the Emancipation Proclamation happened in the early 1860s and that Juneteenth happened in the mid 1860s? You start to question the actual legitimacy of the law and saying that, man, the same law that justifies murdering Black people is also the same law that y'all are able to slow progress around. That's very interesting, and I think that this is a part of that complicated history. Even think about it like this. During Reconstruction, they passed a whole bunch of nefarious laws that was able to criminalize Black people not having jobs, Black people not having to be able to having a place to work, Black people, not having a place to go. You know what I'm saying? At the same time, there were a bunch of individuals that never was held in contempt of the law. Now, they teach us that treason is the highest crime against the country you can ever commit. All of the Confederate soldiers, Confederate generals, they was able to be welcomed back into the country. The administration, that presidential administration, never made them take consequences for breaking the law. The same administration created laws to put Black people to re-enslave us, and to justify murdering us, going all the way back to that day. So this is the history that it's important that we always already talk about, in the midst of talking about how beautiful and how great, not only the celebration of Juneteenth has been, but also how beautiful and how great Black culture has been able to be developed and created in face and despite of all this ugliness around us. You know what I'm saying? You give us lemons, we're going to make lemonade, lemon meringue, lemon pie. loose, lemon. I'm talking about we gonna bust it down. You feel me? And this is the beauty, I think, of Black culture. In many instances, we're forced to be resilient. We make it look so cool that other groups start wanting. I also feel like, man, hey, I struggle too. I am too. It's like, yeah, that's how sexy you can make the struggle look. You feel me? And that's, to me, it's very insidious, but it still speaks to, you know what I'm saying, how complex Black culture is.
Yeah, 100%. And I do want to bring us forward now too, just given the situation with the Voting Rights Act and everything that's been happening across the South. For anyone who maybe hasn't been paying attention, I'm sorry, but it's not good news. We have, gosh, if I can list off the top of my head, I mean, Florida, Tennessee, Louisiana, they've all passed new maps that will go into effect during the midterms. And then we have South Carolina, Mississippi, Georgia. They are all also trying to pass new maps right now that won't go into effect in the midterms, but will going forward, that will eliminate majority Black and majority minority districts across the South. When you see this happening now in 2026, can I ask you, George, just like, at what point did you see the writing on the wall that this was going to happen? And for people who are kind of just now waking up to it, do you have words of encouragement on the fight back?
And I would say I started seeing this take a turn really the minute this current administration started being legitimized the first time.
Yeah.
And that's not because of the people, because of the policy specifically. I want to say that, you know what I'm saying? I don't know them people. I don't know who they are. I don't know them. You know what I mean? Now in some instances, if it walk like a duck and it talk like a duck. But for legal purposes, I'm going to say I don't know them people. You know what I'm saying? But I do know in terms of policy, there was a bunch of things that was proposed that I think once they became legitimized in 2015, it instantly started showing me. This last go run, I think that when we started talking about Project 2025 and the white supremacist manifesto, you know what I mean, that was laid down through all these different industries, through all these different ideologies, through all these different, you see what I'm saying? To me, it started to show me that it was looking ugly in the way that diversity, equity, and inclusion, critical race theory, being woke, equity, like all these words started to be criminalized and started having policy attached to them to be able to make them seem illegitimate and marginalize them. You feel me? And when I started smelling it, started being like, yeah, I know what that smell. I know what's coming. You know what I'm saying? I know when it starts to smell like that, it's some shit coming next. You know what I'm saying? Like literally, you know. So in this instance, I think that's what we all kind of seen. The people that's kind of just waking up to it right now, it's a reason why this current administration is so hinged on banning particular ideologies and particular books. Right now we see a lot of our folks, our families, our comrades, our people that we in solidarity with in Minneapolis being picked up. What we know is that when they were exercising these things, it was a democratic tool. It was a right. It was a liberty. Those things are now being criminalized, and we see people being picked up by the FBI and getting all type of different cases.
And for people who maybe don't have the context for what George is alluding to, just yesterday, federal law enforcement picked up, I believe they made 15 arrests in total. Don't hold me accountable to that number, but around 15 people were arrested for taking part in the legal observation process in Minneapolis. So these are folks who go out and document ICE activities, whether that's being on the street filming them or just tracking their operations throughout the community to try to stand up for immigrants throughout Minnesota. These activists were arrested for impeding law enforcement operations. And I'd love to point out the fact that we had 15 activists arrested on felony charges in Minnesota before a single charge filed against the law enforcement officers who ended the lives of Renee Good or Alex Preddy. That's what we're up against, right? I hate to say it, but I hope this is the kind of moment that white people will finally wake up and listen to what Black and brown communities have been screaming for all of American history. That, oh, my laptop closed. I hope I'm still on.
You still on? You still on?
Okay,
I still can hear you.
It just, the screen went frozen on mine. But we have this abuse of authority that is proliferating through American government and making it harder to fight back, but all the more crucial that we continue to fight back in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing that I agree, and I was about to say. So I hope that, you know, to especially to the white people that are watching, that are listening, understand that a lot of the fear and discomfort and uncertainty that y'all are feeling right now is not only like generalizing, like, man, this is what we've been experiencing all of history. It's like there was the Biden administration and there was the Trump administration before the Biden administration, now the Trump administration now, that passed a bunch of policies that disproportionately criminalize different people, especially Black folks. And there was a bunch of, you know, flags that were waved in different instances. It was real cool and real trendy to hop on. You know what I'm saying? And then we seen that when it became uncool and untrendy to hop on, even though there was a rise in police deaths for Black people after George Floyd, there was not a big trend or coolness around that. You know what I'm saying? We also know that I would say especially from an administration policy standpoint, all fascism matters.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And my beef with a lot of white liberals, particularly right now, and I'll say now this is going into, I feel like I'm getting over it. You feel me? It's like a little resentment, but we got, you know what I'm saying, things to do. But this is how I see it, though. You have to always already think about how fascism was already being mixed into different policies, and that fascism only mattered to you when the administration changed. And I think that's something that we have to sit with. When we hear the quote about they came for me in the morning, they came for this and they came for you. Or when I was trying to tell y'all, y'all ain't want to listen. They came for them, y'all ain't want to listen. They came for y'all, those are the only ones left. I think that there was some things that happened during the Biden administration that a lot of people kind of turned their eyes to. Specifically, when you had people using their First Amendment rights the same way that Trump is attacking First Amendment rights, we had people that was quiet.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's like how when you normalize this from a policy making standpoint, I'm just talking about policies.
Yeah.
Talking about policies, you feel me? Hey, if you have college students that are being taught about their liberal civil rights, you feel me? And they are getting their head beat in and having policies passed on them that criminalize how they take on their First Amendment, how they petition, how they protest, then that is fascism. Especially if you agree that it happening on this current administration is fascism. So a lot of people right now, you can't pick and choose when you say fascism matter. You can't pick and choose when you feel like Black lives matter. Mm-hmm. So right now we're sitting in an ugly time in our country, and an ugly time in our comfort, where you have to really sit with a lot of the things you let pass and you let cool and you feel like it wasn't me. You feel me? As long as, hey, it is what it is. Now we all having to sit in it. And I feel like in some instances it might be too late. In some instances it's like, I don't know what you're willing to give up in terms of comfort, in terms of fighting. And I say that to the people that's building up my follower thing. When I say fighting, I'm thinking about the history that y'all highlight when y'all start talking about Martin Luther King, every Martin Luther King History Day. To my people that's running my file, every time y'all highlight how great America is, and you say specifically because of what Black people that's had to overcome, I'm talking about the fighting that we had to do to overcome that. I want to be clear and understand that the fighting I'm talking about, it predates whatever bullshit y'all trying to be on right now. And I think that, you know what I mean, in terms of timelines, in terms of sequencing, that's very important when you put it in my file.
100% agree. And I especially love that you bring up just like the contradictions when it comes to the Biden administration, because this really is an area where, you know, depending on whether you're following on the Republican or Democrat line, the nitty gritty details may differ, but at the end of the day, we are constantly up against these varying forms of oppression. And that's something we need to hold all politicians, all elected officials accountable for, and that people need to stay engaged with, because it's hard when it's just like 2020, you had the big Black Lives Matter movement occurring. And then Biden gets in office and you see it kind of die off. These issues of like police brutality didn't go away, but the man in the White House changed, and suddenly you lost a lot of energy, at least from what I could see from, my community of like white liberals, white leftists, right? And I think that's something, especially like if you are a white person and an ally in this fight, you need to recognize the need to be staying engaged, right?
Right now, we lost in the South of bipartisan politics when it comes to structural violence of police towards communities of color, especially Black folks. Want to be clear that there is a bunch of dialogue happening around the concept of people of color, especially when it comes to Black folks and other non-Black communities. But in terms of this conversation, police brutality is bipartisan. George Floyd was murdered in a blue state, in a blue city. Ahmaud Arbery was killed in a red state, in a red city. So when it comes for what I like to call the insatiable appetite for Black death, we know that regardless of what party is doing policies on the state level, on the local level, or the federal level, there is a consistency for anti-Black violence and anti-Black criminality. I think that Huey P. Newton had an amazing quote about being able to understand. He talked about power. He said that power is the ability to define the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. And I hope me being able to lay down this structural analysis around police brutality that's showing you whether we're talking about red or blue or left or right, there's always been some type of solidarity around Black suffering, especially when you think about Reconstruction era, when you think about the Emancipation Proclamation. The compromise was Black suffering. Hey, we have a conflict again for this presidential election. You know what? I will let y'all win if y'all pull the troops out of the South. The deal was Black suffering, Black death. So when we talk about police brutality, it's to understand that Democrats and liberals don't corner the market on fighting against it. Or better, I should say, Republicans and the conservatives don't corner the market on police brutality. I think that's very important. The second thing I would say is that when it comes to understanding history in this country, especially around Black folks, you have to have a structural analysis, because if you don't, you won't have the literacy to really speak towards, to read and write towards how Black people have been positioned in this country. And I ain't even gonna get into the intersections of what happened, but I want to get into this to this case though, and I'm gonna try to be quick when I say this. Black children in this country are never really allowed to be children. A lot of children in our community are always adultified. and held to adult standards at a very young age. That's the reason why like 95 to 96% of the children that's charged as adults in this country are black children or children of color, right? The second thing I would say is that this administration and not only this current administration, when this administration had people that was on the state level and local level, they were passing a bunch of anti-LGBTQ and anti-queer policies and bills in the name of protecting children. They criminalized a bunch of drag queens, a bunch of trans folks in the name of protecting children. They banned a whole bunch of books in the name of protecting children. They criminalize a bunch of black culture because they say it is a bad impact and bad influence against children. So they do a lot of things about protecting children. When you have not only law enforcement, but you have a community that loves trying to police other communities in the name of protecting children, justify the murder of a 1-year-old child, to me, you start to get into what I call conservative contradictions. If we have policies that says that harsh and unusual punishment is against the law, what does it mean to justify murdering a 1-year-old in pursuit of somebody that allegedly was stealing? Legally, does stealing equal death? No. So even if you believe the mother of the child was guilty of a crime, that crime does not justify murder. The last thing I say in this right here, because I've been going back over the Project 2025 again, Alex. Do you know how much protecting children is in that shit? Yeah, yeah. Hey, but hey, hey. So to me, think about how insidious justifying and rationalizing murdering a child in pursuit of a alleged thief. It's being just you want to conserve the Constitution. That's what y'all say. You a conservative because you want to conserve the Constitution. That's what you're a conservative because you want to conserve traditions and norms around the Constitution. That's what they say. We know this. You know what I'm saying? That's what they say. You know what I mean? And just, Cohen Riley, her name, right? You know, Cohen Wiley, Cohen Wiley, Cohen Wiley, like the college with a K. Yeah, man. Yeah. It's just to me, like you ain't even gotta do a bunch of research. If your ethical, moral compass is on, you know the direction of talking about anybody murdering a child, anybody murdering a child, and then being real with you, I might be inspired to go off on something. Cause it's like, man, think about it, man. Carmelo Anthony just got convicted of murder because they said the force that he used was not self-defense and it justified X, Y, and Z. I'm going to argue that the same audience that's talking and running and celebrating Carmelo Anthony being, convicted, they want to hold a 17-year-old to a higher standard and a higher extent of the law than the actual law enforcement. So law enforcement is justified in being able to murder anything, anybody, especially if they feel like they're in fear for their life, especially if they feel like it's self-defense. It was me or them. But if a 17-year-old is murdered, that a 1-year-old is murdered, and the 17-year-old I'm talking about is murder. I'm talking about Cyrus Belton in South Carolina. They justified his death because, Mr. Child said that he was in danger. He was in fear for his life. So when I open up this talking about the adultification of kids, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. even that, though, like it's, man, even that though, it's like you believe in due process of law, you believe innocent until proven guilty. So how does it justify someone being judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to pursuit of the law? I think that right now we're seeing that we live in different Americas. We seen in one instance a black child get justified in being murdered because somebody said that they were in fear of their life, and this child ran 120 yards, a football field plus some, and they were still justified in killing them because this person said they were in fear for their life. 7 days later, we seen a 17-year-old, and you know what I'm saying, in another state, but the people that were defending what's happening, that's consistent, they live in different states and they don't see what it's different. So people listening, well, consciously of South Carolina, where Cyrus Belton was justifiably killed, and Austin Metcalf got killed in Texas, two different states. Even if you believe that, y'all be in the same goddamn state justifying your horrible logic. The second thing is this, though. So the Second Amendment also is the right to bear arms. We also know that shoot first and ask question later is something that we see that's normalized, but we also see that not for everybody. And I think that's the ugly truth that this country don't want to deal with. That's the ugly truth this current administration don't want to deal with, and that's why they're erasing history. Hey, you can be a second right gun enthusiastic, come and take it, you know what I'm saying, all that old, but you will justify the mere presence, the idea of presence of a gun in possession of a black person, killing them and being in fear for their life, at the same time talking about let them blaze. This is the contradiction. And this right here ain't even just conservatives. It's a bunch of different individuals that's engaged with logic of black death and black suffering because you heard there was an alleged gun in there. I heard a lot of different left-leaning people talking about what happened with Cyrus Belton and Rich Child over in South Carolina, and you said, well, it did allegedly have a blicky, have a gun. Yeah, you are also a part of the problem. You see what I'm saying? And to me, this is the ugly truth, ugly history. Second Amendment has always been a part of the thing that we going off of. And it's also been the thing that criminalizes and justifies black death because the Negro had a gun. That's the reason why the news media will always sensationalize unarmed black, blah, 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 blah. Unarmed, even though you legally able to have an arm. Even in open carry states like South Carolina, like Texas, like Georgia, like Louisiana, all these states, you can down here we have different, man, black folks get killed for that. And to me, this the history. The last thing I say, because I'm moving, y'all see I'm sweating, y'all. That's why I'm sweating. This room is empty, you know what I'm saying? But listen, it is what it is. It is what it is. Uh I did a video about Sugarland, Texas, and how it was a plantation that turned into a prison. Sugarland, Texas is now seen as a suburb slash hood. I'll make a video about that later on. In Texas, and they had recovered a few years ago. I think it was 108 bodies in a mass grave in Sugarland, Texas, and it led to research around the land lease prison system and how there were children as young as I think 10 years old and men as old as 75, their bodies that were found in these mass graves because the land lease prison system allowed for us to recriminalize, people that were celebrating Juneteenth and making them, work and mine sugar until they die, or make them work and mine, move through marshes where they being exposed to all type of bacteria and diseases. And when they died, they would just go criminalize a new black body and throw those into a mass grave. So when we think about Juneteenth, it's also the insidious history that the various states and the various counties around Galveston that wanted to hide Juneteenth from black people, while also the various counties and cities that also engaged in very lucrative Jim Crow, very lucrative sharecropping, very lucrative land lease prison system. And to this day, my home state is the number one state for prisons. in this present moment, what's giving me hope is different people coming into consciousness, no pun intended, about what's going on in the world and how the world has been operating in many instances. I think the thing I want to encourage people on is that if you believe anything right now that we're experiencing is very monumental, or very unique, I say, because it's all monumental. I'm not going to get into the monumental nature of what we're experiencing. But if you think it is new or unprecedented, I think you should dig more through the historical archive, dig more through the history of this country, dig more through policy, dig more through, the different groups and organizations in this country that have been criminalized due to different things. Native Americans didn't gain the right to vote until like the 1920s or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So when we think about democracy and protecting democracy and defending democracy, understand just as the way that this current administration is trying to romanticize American history, make sure y'all not doing the same thing when y'all talking about protecting and defending democracy. Make sure when we had this conversation, you playing this conversation and y'all thinking about this conversation, everything I've talked about that Black people have experienced that under democracy, and everything that we've gained in spite of democracy. Being able to drink from the water fountains, being able to take a number 2 next to you in the bathroom, being able to read a book next to you, being able to get a diploma next to you, all these things was done by blood. In democracy, these supposed to be God-given rights. Black people had to spill blood for every right that we have in this country. I would say that it's undemocratic, but it's happened under this democratic statute, this very democratic framework. When y'all talk about democracy, ask yourself, is this a romanticized, sanitized idea of democracy that I believe that it can become? And when you answer that question, in the most trigger warning, ugliest metaphor that I want to end this on, think about how we analyze the domestic violence victim that believed their abuser would change, even though there is years and years and years and years and years of evidence of abuse. Think about the different terms that we use for these individuals, for mainly that's when women are experiencing this, because I'm not going to act like it's not gendered. Think about what we talk about in terms of how you start to rationalize with that violence and that oppression. In the most uncomfortable declaration, I would argue that is the relationship that most people in democratic Western world have to democracy. You have a cognitive dissonance, you feel me, placebo, but my abuser can be better eventually. That's the relationship that y'all have with democracy. And I know that a lot of y'all that's leaning in like, I don't know, I was with you until you said that. Come on and have a conversation with me. As you can tell, because you was with me when I was just first cooking, because you can tell I'm not a dummy and I understand history. Let's really sit with the real, ugly, transparent history of democracy. Education is elevation. I appreciate y'all for having me on my mind. Man, I appreciate everybody that's tuned in. I know to the people in my audience, I've been talking about this damn music video. I am still waiting on these editors to get them back to me. I'm actually going to have 2 music videos to now to choose from. Shout out to everybody that has been tuning in. All the paid subscribers. Shout out to y'all. I appreciate y'all definitely. And I'll have more content coming y'all way. As you know what I'm saying, as well as make sure, you know what I'm saying, y'all follow Alex. What's the group you with right now? I'm sorry, I left my brain. Make sure y'all follow Feel Good Action. And, stay tuned in all the work they're doing as well. And shout out to all my fellow small town rural Americans, man. Whether you from the Midwest, whether you from the South, whether you from up north, like shout out to all my small town rural people, you know what I'm saying, around the country that ain't from the big cities, man. We exist, we matter, and the way that politics at our community is a little bit different than the way they talk about these, grand old big cities. Yes, yes.